Hello, welcome to my Kickstarter pitch video. You really need to actually see the video I made a couple of days ago that I was planning to use as my main video, which gives my bona fides and my ability to be so organised and, what's more important, to make sure that anybody who puts their time or money into this project is putting it into something where the intellectual property will be carefully treble backed up elsewhere, so that if I drop dead, as I have the story is actually 2/3 written up on my website. The story is there protected. The contacts is the wrong word. The characters who were involved at the time are accessible so that somebody else can take it over. And also, as I kind of invented an aspect of law about making important agreements within families, I'm not going to shaft anybody. Anyway, that video is 5 gigabytes and I couldn't get it up. So let's do this very, very quickly. Now, this is my office. Everything in here is so organised it's daft. I've been based here 6 months, incredibly happily, incredibly focused, and in a few weeks must move on. I'm on the, this is actually one of the most famous walking paths in an area of Britain called the Marches, borderlands of England and Wales. Every afternoon I go and do 2 hours walking in the hills. I'm the healthiest person for my age there is. Right, to the point. So, I'm a very bookish person. Good literature. D.H. Lawrence, H.E. Bates, Mary Ann Evans, the greatest, bravest, kind of social reforming, social justice writer ever. And I was the centre of a period of a situation nearly 20 years ago that lots of people have said, why isn't it in a book? Now, here's the thing. I'm not a cynic. I raised myself by good literature, without a television, and just as important, good film. Now, what's this Kickstarter for? I want a few people who are not cynics, who know a bit about film and writing, to just join with me and get this project now quickly somewhere where a decent feature film is going to be made. Now, I'm not a cynic. I went through a period of a few years, from 2003, 4, 5, where I know most people would have given up. And good for me. One of the reasons I persisted, and believe me, I went through long periods totally alone. Not a friend in the world. Oh, people aware of a situation. Nobody steps forward to help you. I persisted through that period, which at some times was your heart's in your stomach, regularly over a couple of years, because I took a stand against. And one of the problems in this whole world of activism is the terminology. People can use phrases like the establishment or words like the establishment, etc., etc. But you have a great big mass of the vested interests. And it can be from what we call the establishment, the bureaucracy, the bossocracy, the corporations, the whole damn lot. It's just vested interests, or I use a shortcut word, the system. I stood up very, very openly against the system, and nobody helps you. I mean, there might be the odd person that is taking a proper stance against the system where they do have one or two allies, close allies, real allies who are going to stick in through thick and thin. The thing that kept me going was, in the back of my mind, good film. Now, since 2005-06, I've actually looked for more good film. Good film, I raise myself on. Art house, even avant-garde film. They're great films. Films like the Three Colours series, they changed our lives. Killing Fields changed our lives. Really good film on how to give it to the man, but you've got to keep your finger clean. That's the key to it all. Give it to the man. Stand up, the little guy or the little woman against the system. Really good films are in my soul. They power you forward. So I'm not a cynic. Really good film completely transformed my life. And I want something made that's along those lines. Now, the difficulty with my pitch is people put things into boxes. This may be put into a box, a legal drama, not at all. Furthermore, we all know that legal dramas are pretty dull. And anyway, a legal drama, to push yourself forward, there have to be human things ongoing. Now, I haven't put that very well. Let me just put it this way. There's one little scene that could be in this where, never having even had a parking ticket for many years, I was bizarrely held on remand while things were sorted out. This was nearly 20 years ago. And I would get up at about 5:30 in the morning when the jail wing was quiet and be working away for a couple of hours, writing to people, because when you're in a situation that you know is, let's just put it, say, out of balance, unwarranted, when you're in a situation, you actually have to get allies, attention, etc. Anyway, so I'd get up. Whenever in a jail cell in Britain, you have to share with somebody, and I'd get up before my roommate was awake and be working away at the little desk. And every half an hour or quarter of an hour, they come round, the prison warders, and you hear the clink of the cover. And there was one warder who was quite an old chap, and he had a very, very quiet nature. He was a really nice man, actually. And after a few weeks, he sort of came to talk to me. He said, I see you every morning. You know, you're up there. You're up at 6 o'clock, working away, writing away. Are you really sure? You know, you're probably doing yourself an injury here. You know, you're exhausting yourself, whatever. Are you really sure? Now, one thing you can't do, because even in a jail there is this kind of network of authority is the wrong way of putting it. There is a socio-political pecking order system. You can't stand up for yourself. You can't say what you really feel. So I sort of, I take your point. I played along with him. But you see, that really is what it's all about. And the hierarchy at this jail, the governor came, the assistant governor, to be fair, came in when I was put in there. It's like, he came in and said, what are you doing here? Yeah, most of us in here would do exactly what you did, matey. We've no idea why you're in here, you know? You've got no criminal record, etc., etc. And we can tell you're just a nice, reasonably balanced person. But the thing is that throughout the course of fighting, and I'm deliberately avoiding the word injustice here, fighting for a better outcome, you constantly come up with people we can almost call them on your own side, who nevertheless are just a bit negative. They're like, well, they'll suggest they're well-meaning, who will like, are you really sure you should be doing this? You're right. Somehow keeping your focus on what is the fair and human better outcome is the hardest thing of all. And that really is what it's all about. And good film where human beings are brought to life who fought for things to be better is deep within me. Now, I can list them all, quite a few of them quickly. Obviously, we've got Erin Brockovich, although she wasn't facing any personal risk, it has to be said. I was, okay? We've got the Keira Knightley GCHQ film. That is fantastic. That's a great film, because that actually shows you how behind the scenes, the state, the powers that be, the vested interest, will even be attacking you through your family, through your loved members. I've experienced that. Okay. McLibel. I'm going to include in this, to be honest, my favourite film of standing up for yourself, Even the Rain, the Spanish film about the revolutionaries in Bolivia, although it's actually incorrect in that there were far more women who stood up against the system than men. That film was made by a Spanish director. So there's a range of these films, and the great one, although a little bit extreme, was Killing Fields. That made you genuinely respect, particularly the brown man who took great risks to get the truth out. However, I also know, because I've watched so many of them, and I've made little essays on my website about, like, for example, the film McLibel. Now, it not taking away from Helen Steele in any way. There has to be some comedy, some genuine, life-affirming, heartfelt stuff as you're going along. It's absolutely critical, because the whole process, these processes that often go on over years, are so depressing, exhausting. The system grinds you down. Now, on the radio this morning, the Today programme is yet another issue that affects the middle classes, because people assume the comfortable middle classes. By the way, the film Nomadland is an absolute disaster. I've known over the years, I've spent most of my time living in a tenanted house, but I know quite a few van people. And there is no difference between the genders, none. Ladies who live in vans, in fact there's a lady who comes, who for a year was living in a large van, and she's been living in that van 40 years. I know her. Women who live in vans and men are the same. We're all happy. We are all a little bit aside. We do not let the melodrama of ordinary bourgeois life grind us down. It's a disastrous movie. I think it's actually kind of misusing femininity, that film. Anyway, I'm not making Nomadland. On Radio 4 this morning, so you'll think, fella in van, scruffs at the bottom fighting for their rights. We have Credit Suisse First Boston has to be bailed out for $500 billion. Could be another 2008. Well, it's going to be a partial 2008 ongoing. The great book about injustice and I've read many, is Sue Cameron's book, and it's slightly wrongly titled, The Cheating Classes. And I happened to read it in about 2006 after my own issues were sort of all dealt with. And it is the great book. And it's about you middle class people. How, out of the blue, due to some planning dispute, some boundary fence dispute, some access dispute, you sitting there today on your 750 grand in your 750 grand property with your mortgage mainly paid off, a lifetime's work, and Sue Cameron, she uses 8 or 9 case studies of how a citizen who all her life has pretty much done the right thing, been a striver, hard worker, plodding along, something can happen, and this whole system, which is not some big conspiracy, it's the way it is. The solicitors, accountants, county councillors, town councillors, those who are connected, gradually conspires against you and picks you, and it can happen to you. Maybe you're somebody whose business has money with CSFB, and maybe it's going to wobble, and maybe unjustly you don't get your slice of the cake, and you have to go to law, or you have to somehow fight to retain your bourgeois existence. Now, the hard thing about doing a Kickstarter is in America, there is this culture, in Britain not so much. And I'm going off on a tangent that's unhelpful. I'm going to come back and go off on another tangent that I know is the most important thing in all of contemporary human existence since societies gradually in the West became more secular 50, 75 years ago. So, fighting your cause, having fun while you're doing it, and more importantly, now, people might, I just happen to have been living in an area where you could say that Hackney, Camden Town, Kew, etc. has bought everything for miles. There aren't any cheap houses left. I don't mind in the slightest. I wouldn't have my life any other way. And I'm focused and organised. Every single thing. The most important thing here, you have to adapt. These are cheap fountain pens. If you use a fountain pen in damp conditions, it's more efficient than if you use a biro, because biros don't like the damp quite so much. You adapt. I'm a machine of, let's get to the big word, real activism. Now, I'm not really an activist anymore, although I have been an environmental operator for the last decade. And the most important thing about being an activist is you have to be organised. Believe me, I'm so organised it's ridiculous. Every single thing has its place. As I had to go into this mode 20 years ago. And that's actually the thing I want to show the world through this film, which has got love, death, Midnight Express kind of jails, blah, 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 blah. All sorts of interesting, quirky character moments. But, and this might sound like a negative, on Radio 4, and I'm sure it's on the same on National Public Radio and even, MSNBC. Virtually every writer and filmmaker and half the people in the arts for about the last 5-ish years get introduced as writer and activist. Sorry. Being an activist is risking. A real one is risking everything. Absolutely everything. And there is a whole layer, a whole level of everything beyond one's financial health. You risk your network of friends, your family members, the whole damn thing. You pay in blood if you're going to do it properly. Now, okay, rah, rah, rah. So, he was a proper one. The point being that this whole model, which I almost arguably invented, putting your story of injustice out on Facebook. In fact, I did invent it. I know I did, because it was discussed in the appeal court. It was approved. I was the first person that took that to the highest courts in Britain. It wasn't the thrust of what I was doing, but putting your this, that, and the other on Facebook, liking other people putting stuff online. Sorry, that's not activism. It's actually part of the problem. Because if you're going to stand up against the system, you have to go all the way. And more importantly, they have to see that you're going to go all the way. They actually have to experience that in your flesh, in your actual being that they encounter. And if you're any good, if you're sincere and keep at it, then they start to think, this one's dangerous, or is this one so good we're going to have to watch out for him? And maybe, you never hear this, you never told this, but maybe even cooperate with him. That's what real activism is. And as I say, even the middle classes, as we yet again are likely to enter, and personally I think it's hilarious, wonderful, good for the society. That's the point. The point is, I ended up in a situation I would never have dreamed I ended up in it. Now, I know that today, let's just put it this way. Prior to 2003, although I'd had a bit of sorting myself out via dealing with kids prior to this, I was self-obsessed, effete, rather thoughtless, middle-classish, 35-year-old. Now, I'd read the books of John Pilger, I read The Guardian, I saw the great films of social justice. But still, they didn't really change you. They change you a bit. They're lodged inside of you. But it's only when you have to fight for your own, retaining your own existence that you cherish. It's only when you have to fight that you grow up and also you adjust. Such that it, in a sustained way, becomes so absurdly enriching. That's the point. Now, somewhere down the bottom of this page, it says something like, once in your life, maybe just once in your life, fight for something. I'm the lucky one, I didn't have a choice. But that fight, even if it has exhaustion, pain, risk, ostracization, somehow it enhances you. To this day, it's why I'm more alive, I know, than almost everybody I encounter. It's why I just motor on. And I do think that Britain is going to have to wake up about this. We are going to have to be a society where we take more citizen actions about all sorts of things. And incidentally, a new campaign has been launched about the River Wye, where my daughter was brought up swimming in over a decade, and they failed so far. They're going to have to ramp it up. This is not Extinction Rebellion. This is actually a large environmental organisation. They're going to take a legal campaign. You have to push. I'm going to end with one thing, because this is deep down actually what I know and care about. Now, this film is not about custody cases. The Squid and the Whale, which is a pretty awful and depressing film, has kind of done that. Not really a legal drama. It's much more a sort of, it's got to be part comedic. But as somebody who was involved in quite a big social justice change, over the last 15 years, of course I listened to anything intelligent about where we are in society. I would be called a good old-fashioned Sam Harris type of progressive liberal. That's what I am. I've pretty much always been like that. But ever since mid-last decade, we have endless framing things in certain ways. Now, virtually every discussion about justice in Britain is, now I should add in the word rightly, but it's framed in terms of, okay, violence against women is the number one issue. Now, I don't disagree, except nobody ever talks about the only solution I know there is. But before we get there, let's also just add in a little bit of factual data. Man-on-man violence, I'm quite sure, hurts more fellow human beings by far than violence towards women by men. And any violence against any human being, I'm a pacifist. I've become a real pacifist, particularly over the last 20, 25 years. But all violence is terrible. I know only one thing in life, one thing for sure. And just like the Children's Act, we'll put in the usual little disclaimer. Oh, there are some extreme outlier situations where this doesn't apply. But in my long enough life, living in societies all over the world and being very aware of and caring tremendously about wars, violence, etc., etc., I know only one thing, and this is it. I experienced it myself. I was lucky I was not a violent or aggressive person in my 20s, but the thing I know is this, that if men, who generally do more of the warmongering and aggressive acts in society, be it towards women or towards other men, if men, let's just say for the sake of argument, in their 20s, 30s, if they spend a lot of time around young children, inside of them they become nicer, more peaceful, more thoughtful of all fellow human beings. A man who has spent a lot of time around a young child is far less likely to join the army, be an aggressor in any situation, hurt a fellow human being. It is the number one remedy, solution to pretty much all the ills of society. If my daughter has lined up 5 men off internet dating today and asked, which one should I go for? Who's the one who spent time around young kids? Full stop. But it's got to be a reasonable amount of time. It can't be just a few hours here and there. You've had to have spent days synchronizing your soul with that of a helpless young child and learnt that all life is precious and valuable, and no, do not even drive your vehicle over the speed limit, because you may hurt another human being. It is the one thing that works, the only thing. We live in a world where, despite recent woke politics, or call it what you want, 80-90% of human beings will still have children. And I'm sorry, the one and only thing that sorts men out when they're young adults is spending time around young kids. It happened to me, and there are plenty of instances where obviously this is the case with other men. And we do not, as a society, every activist from Baroness Helena Kennedy down, who quite rightly are on Radio 4 every other 10 minutes, speaking about all sorts of aspects where society's gone wrong. Not one of them can ever speak of this solution. There is not enough money in the world to therapize, work on every man who's gone a bit bloody wonky in his 20s or younger. The one thing that makes society safer is men being around young kids a lot. So anything that can also, as a side effect, just focus society in on that is only good. Is that why I turned the camera on? I guess so.